Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. I'm so excited today. I have Callum Wilkinson from Kepler College. And I watched a presentation that he did, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I was blown away. And so I said, you have to come on to my channel closer to the election. He is not only an astrologer, but he's a political organizer, and he is the host of two very interesting shows on YouTube for Kepler College. So today, what we're going to be talking about here on the Lawless Astrology channel is the solar return charts for the two election candidates, and also just kind of the election in general, what we think is going to happen, and how we can brace ourselves for this tumultuous next few weeks.
Just a little
So,
bit.
yeah, just a little drama. Anyway, Callum, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I will say, as I said before the recording, wonderful work on your channel. It seems like you're building a wonderful community there, and I look forward to watching more content that you produce.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I'm getting some really good astrologers, and I am loving the perspectives that everyone is taking on this election because let's face it, we just can't escape it right now. And
Absolutely.
that's and you also have some big news about your personal life. Do you want to share that you will actually
Yeah,
be
I've
voting?
I've just become an American citizen, and I live here in North Carolina. So we are obviously in a very important swing state. So I actually, after this recording today, I'll be going out to cast my vote. So I'm very, very excited for
That
today.
is just like the best news ever, which does tell me that this video has to get posted today. Somehow, some way, I am posting this video today.
And
So
I will say you have brilliantly esteemed astrologers. I'm not as articulate as those people, but I'll try my best.
don't believe him. Don't believe a word he says. I watch his channel all the time, which, by the way, I'm going to put below in the notes. So make sure that you go over and you subscribe to Kepler Colleges, because if you like getting exposed to all different kinds of astrologers, we were talking before, Callum was saying how lucky he is. He gets to speak with like Vedic astrologers and evolutionary astrologers and Hellenistic astrologers and all different topics. They just launched something where they're doing forecasts now. So, there's just a lot of variety. This is like the best time to learn astrology because there is so much. I feel like since COVID, frankly, it's been like a renaissance
It,
for
it really has.
astrology.
It's really tapped into the zeitgeist. I mean, you see it all over social media. The younger generations are getting involved, and it's absolutely exploded. And I think that's the importance of bringing quality content like you do yourself to society as we're doing this. A quick plug, by the way, we're doing Leaders in Astrology. We have Demetra George next week, the one and only Demetra George. So if you want to check that out, we'll be doing that next week. So
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with her, she's incredibly well known within the astrology community because she has written a very classic book about the goddesses. And she kind of recognized how patriarchal the lens through which we look at astrology, there's so many male planets, what we call male planets. And so, she really brought forth a lot of the female goddess planetoids and asteroids. And so, anyway, that sounds like it's going to be amazing. Okay, we've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to actually let Callum do a lot of the talking on this one, which might be hard for me because I like to talk, but I'm going to try not to interrupt you. But he's looking at the solar return charts, which is something that I don't do that often. So as an evolutionary astrologer, I kind of look at more like mundane and bigger picture, Pluto, the nodes. So Callum, do you want to, set us up or just start sharing and dig in? Either way, whatever works for you.
yeah, one word about solar returns, and the reason why I like to use them, particularly for elections and for candidates, is the solar return gives you the flavor for the full year. So it encompasses not only the campaign, it brings in the election day and also the inauguration. And I do look at the charts of election day and inauguration, but the issue at the moment with looking at charts of election day is that in this modern society, in this modern times, particularly in the United States, it's not really election day anymore. It's more of an election month. And as I've mentioned before, I'm voting early today. We've already had, I think, millions of ballots cast already. So the information is not as poignant as it would be if it was just on election day. I'd even call election day now Republican election day because more Republicans will be coming out on election day. So that's just one of the reasons why I use solar returns. But yes, we can certainly share some of the solar returns and take a look.
Okay, great. So you go ahead and pull that up, and I'm going to put a
Okay.
plug in for everybody. Don't forget to vote. Vote early. Make a plan. I'm going to be doing a video because I was talking to Celeste Brooks, and we were sort of both saying, like, oh, wow, there could be some big weather event on election day that causes disruption. So plan to vote early if you can. I know everyone on this who watches this channel is going to vote. Obviously, you know which way I would like you to vote. And Callum, take it away.
Absolutely. And I will say Celeste is absolutely wonderful, and she's so wonderful in her forecast, and I really enjoy your interviews with her. Okay, so let's get into Donald Trump's solar return. Now, one of the advantages of astrology is we can look back to look forward. And this is what I do often when I'm looking at any sort of predictive work. And one of the most striking things, one of the arguments I'm going to make today, is that Donald Trump's solar return of 2016 was far more powerful than the one he's got this year. And if we look back to 2016, obviously it was the year from June when he was born to the June the following his campaign. He was elected president, and it was a very, very strong solar return. Now, what we do with these solar returns, I don't find solar returns as a standalone chart. We've got the solar return in the middle wheel here, is that effective. What everything comes to down to astrology, and for me, is everything is in the context of the natal chart. So whether you're using directions or progressions or transits, everything comes back to the natal chart. So you have to bring in that context. So what I do is we have the solar return in the inner wheel and the natal chart in the outer wheel, and we see what's going on. Any questions there?
No, I think that that's great. And I think that is a really good point, especially for any beginner astrologers. Every single thing you do always comes back to the natal chart, even if it's a transit chart. It has to be looked at through the lens of the natal chart. So I love that, that's kind of something you highlighted here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I forgot to mention earlier, I'm not speaking on behalf of Kepler College. I know I've got it in the promotion in the corner, but this is just my opinions and analysis. So I'm not speaking on behalf of Kepler College.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Callum,
diving.
Callum is also, like I said, a political organizer. He's out there fighting the good fight with all of us. So he is speaking on behalf of that side of himself.
Absolutely.
And as an astrologer, because this is very valid, good astrology. So don't let that fool you that we actually pay attention to politics.
And Dabney, you bring up a really great point in that some of the issues with political predictive work is that you have to look through the lens of the astrologer and any biases they have. And of course, I have my own, you have yours. So we always have to keep that in mind, whoever we're watching on YouTube or any presentations that we watch. I'm fully aware of that. But I think this is so comprehensive, and I'm trying to be objective as possible. But there is that element of, okay, I am looking for a particular lens, and to keep that in mind as well. So that's a great point that you bring up.
Yeah, no, I was watching something the other day from an astrologer that was predicting Donald Trump was going to win, and it blew me away because they kept saying how they weren't biased, but then they were comparing him to Abraham Lincoln, and I was just like, oh, okay, and like the things they were saying made no sense. So anybody who says that they don't have a lens through which they look at this and they're completely objective, I don't know. I don't always believe them, but I think they think they are. Let's put it that way. So
It's a great point, and it's important to be upfront about that, and I have done in all of these videos. So go into the strength of the solar return for Donald Trump in 2016. Now, one of the things you might have already noticed while you're looking at this chart is, this is all in whole sign, by the way, all of our houses are lining up. So we see the solar return ascendant is the same as Donald Trump's natal ascendant. Now, this usually is a very significant year. And if you go through your own solar return charts and you find a year where all of the houses are lining up, it's kind of a sense of everything falling into place. Now, when I say everything falling into place, that doesn't always necessarily mean positive, but it does mean usually a significant year. Now, actually, in my experience, when all of your houses line up with the solar return, it usually is quite a positive year. In fact, I'm going from one of those years right now. So keep an eye out for it for your audience if they're looking at their own solar return. So straight away, when I pulled this up for Donald Trump for 2016, looking back, I was like, okay, significant year, very, very important. Another thing I use with solar returns is perfections and perfected houses. Are you familiar with perfections, Dabney, or?
I am, but why don't you explain it? And also, let me just interject here too, just because I know there are a lot of beginners on here. A solar return chart really is just taking a look at the chart for the day of your birthday. And so, because it kind of tells you what's coming up for the year ahead, like a lot of the themes. So that's when we say solar return, it's really your birthday chart for that year. So, okay, go ahead and talk about perfections.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So your solar return is when that sun comes back to the natal position. Now, if you look at the times of when that comes around, because of precession and the wobble of the earth, it's not always, it could be like a day or two before or after a couple of hours to your actual time of birth. But that's the astronomy. We won't get into that today. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out. So imperfections, this is an ancient Hellenistic technique, and really in the realms of prediction. And it's really quite a simple technique. You can go each through the 12 years and through a cycle. And what it's going to do is a perfected house year is going to bring up a particular year and a particular house. And so what you're going to do when you see that house, you're going to look at any planets activated in that house in your own natal chart. And you're also going to look for what is called the Lord of the Year, the Time Lord. And the Lord of the Year is the ruler of the house and the perfected house. So I'll talk about this as we get into this chart. So number one, we see all the houses are lining up. Very, very powerful year. It's going to be a significant year for Donald Trump in 2016. What house perfected year are we in? Well, for Donald Trump this year, we're in 11th house perfected year. Now, if you just take the themes of the 11th house, we're talking about goals, ambitions, community. And of course, one of his ambitions was to become the next president of the United States. That was certainly one of his goals. So we have the 11th house perfected year coming up for this year. Now, what planets are activated in this house perfected year? We have the Sun and the Uranus because they're a part of this house. So in this chart, we have the Sun activated and Uranus activated, and that's going to tell us something about what's going to happen this year or the flavor of this year. Now, what do we see with this Uranus that's activated for the solar return? Now, as you can see here, as I've highlighted, Uranus is tightly conjunct the solar return midheaven. Now, what's interesting about 2016, and I wasn't doing predictions at this time, what was interesting about 2016, what was a shock to a lot of commentators and astrologers, everyone had Hillary Clinton for the win. There was very few astrologers or commentators predicting a Donald Trump victory. Part of the issue with Hillary Clinton was, I think she has an issue with her chart in terms of timing. I don't think it's an AA rating. And it was particularly accurate. But anyway, it was a shock to everybody that Donald Trump became the next president of the United States. So looking at this chart of 2016, what was the year theme of this activated Uranus? Conjunct the solar return midheaven. It was unexpected events surrounding his public standing. And of course, he became the next president of the United States. And astrologers, we can't predict Uranus. It's wild, it's upheaval. It's going to do its own thing. We just can't predict Uranus. And of course, with Donald Trump right on the midheaven, that was a significant signature for this year. Okay, what else is compounding the strength of this chart? I talked before about the Lord of the Year. Now, for 11th house perfected year for Donald Trump, Mercury is Lord of the Year because it's the ruler of mutable air. It's the ruler of Gemini. So Mercury is the Lord of the Year, which is going to be a very important planet throughout the year, even throughout the solar return. Now, what's the condition? And now we're leaning more traditional. What is the condition of this Mercury? Very, very strong in domicile. It's in rulership. It's not retrograde. It's direct. That has extra strength. And it's also in a succedent house, giving it a little bit of strength as well. So we're saying, wow, not only are we in 11th house perfected year, we've got Mercury of communication. He was out in the community doing all of his rallies and speeches in 2016. I think if you compare his rallies in 2016 to what he's doing now, I think he did, 4 or 5 times as many as he's done. And this is showing up in the astrology of this year, speaking to all of his fans. He obviously resonated with a segment of the population, and it was all of this Mercury, talking about American protectionism, all of the awful things he's said as well. But it's very, very much apparent with this Lord of the Year, Mercury. Sorry, Dabney, were you going to say something then?
No, I was just looking also at that Neptune in the 8th house.
Ah.
And it really looks like, that to me, that's like the sort of like the cult leader, the hypnotism, the really kind of exerting his, conjunct the nodes there, like really having power over.
That's a great observation. And that Neptune there, we're in mutable water. We're in a Jupiter ruled sign as well. So that expansion, that idealism he had obviously resonated with a certain segment of the population. So that's a great spot, absolutely. And I will say for the audience, when I put this presentation together a couple of months ago, I put it together in like 24 hours. So I'm not mentioning everything in these charts. So if you guys see anything, let me know.
No, I mean, it's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing this with us. And yes, just to remind everyone, this was 2016. That's not this year. So this year is a whole other ball game for he
It
who
really
shall
is
not be named.
a whole different is turned into Voldemort.
Yeah.
Okay, and hopefully we'll get to that stage, which I think we will. Okay, so what else is compounding the strength of this chart? We've talked about the houses lining up. The ascendant, the solar return ascendant is the same as the natal. We've talked about the 11th house perfected year with the activated sun and the Uranus. Natally, sun's quite powerful in this chart. It's conjunct the north node. It meets all the planetary set conditions. And we've talked about the Lord of the Year being very, very strong, domicile, happy, happy days in mutable air in Gemini. What else is compounding the strength of this chart? The ruler of this midheaven, we're in cardinal fire, we're in Aries. The ruler of this midheaven is Mars. So we say to ourselves, what is the condition of Mars? Well, Mars, very, very happy in Scorpio. Traditionally is in rulership in Scorpio, we're in domicile. And if we come back to the natal chart, we are conjunct the natal IC. So for me, I looked back at this chart and I was like, powerful year, communication. It was very much Mars ruled in the midheaven. It had that martial quality where he was just out yelling about the state of the country, all those kind of things. But not only that, these planets were powerful. We're also in an angular house. So our angular houses are the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th. Extra power for this Mars. And so when I looked at this chart, I was just like, wow, what a really powerful year. We've got Pluto, natal Pluto, loosely conjunct the solar return ascendant, another theme of power and control. And it really just what manifested for Donald Trump this in 2016. Now, the last thing, and I will keep repeating the word compounding because this was also the year of his Jupiter return. So many of you might know of your Saturn return. It's usually a time when we have to get disciplined and organized in our late 20s. We also have another Saturn return around the age of 60. And that's a check-in with Saturn, seeing if we're going on the right path. With Jupiter return every 12 years, it's usually quite a joyous time, depending on the condition of your Jupiter and what else is going on in the chart. But for Donald Trump, talk about fortune, talk about good luck for him at this time. Not only was this solar return strong with all of these dignified planets, this Jupiter return was just, I think, the kicker that pushed him over the edge to win the election. That element, again, of good luck, good fortune. Again, this was in December, so this was applying to this Jupiter return. The last thing I'll say about Jupiter, if we go back to the natal chart, Jupiter is powerful in his natal chart. Jupiter, oh, I've gone past the slide. Jupiter in his natal chart, it's in its own terms, in its own bounds. It has dignity by triplicity, excuse me. And we'll also notice, if you see the little s over the top of Jupiter, and many of you might know this, but what this means is it's at its station. So in June 14th, 1946, when Donald Trump was born, and he was born in, June 14th, 1946, on June 15th, 1946, that Jupiter stationed to go direct. Now, anytime a planet is stationing to go direct or retrograde in your chart, it's going to give that chart extra oomph, and that planet is going to be vibrating and has more energy. So if you think about Donald Trump throughout his life, all the things he's gotten away with, I just can't help think of Jupiter and his good luck and good fortune by getting away with everything. It's absolutely ridiculous how much he gets away with. And if we look at the natal chart, the Jupiter also rules his 8th house of inheritances and also borrowing. So he's lied, you can look at that Mercury Neptune square, over 30,000 lies and misleading quotes. But he also told a lie in terms, he said his father only gave him $1 million to start out in life. We know this is factually inaccurate, that Jupiter rule in the 8th, he came to inherit hundreds of millions of dollars from his father. And he's also been very successful borrowing monies from banks. So anyway, long story short, this just shows me how powerful Jupiter is in his natal chart. So when it shows up as a Jupiter return in 2016, in combination with this solar return, I'm just thinking, wow, this is a very significant year. And of course, he became the next president of the United States. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, fascinating. I agree. Like, this is a very powerful chart, and he is a very lucky man in a lot of ways, but putting quotes around lucky.
And Dabney, I think that look's about to change, and that's what we're going to get into.
Okay.
Okay, so talking about looking back to look forward, now we're going to look into this year's solar return for 2024. And for Donald Trump, this solar return goes from June 2024 into June 2025.
I like the picture you picked.
I'm sorry?
I like the picture you picked.
Yeah, in the previous slide, he was having a good time because everything was going his way and he won the 2016 election. This one, not so much. He's in court. He's not having a great time.
Sorry, it made me laugh.
No, I love it. I love it.
Okay. Your thing.
So jumping into 2024 and why this year is different, why this year for the solar return is not as powerful as 2016 when he won. Okay, so let's dive into this chart. Again, the solar return is in the inner wheel. We have his natal chart in the outer wheel. Now, what's coming up for this year? It is the solar return ascendant coming up in his natal 12th house. So when you look at your solar return, pay a lot of attention to the ascendant. This is the house that comes up to the forefront, is ascending, and that's going to give you a flavor for the themes that come up. So this year, the themes that are coming up for Donald Trump is the natal 12th house. So we're talking here about sorrow, self-undoing, hidden enemies, which comes up. Now, don't panic if you have a year where you see your 12th house rising. That doesn't mean that's just going to be the shadow side. It could also mean a lot of retreats or going off and just taking a year, maybe we take a bit of a break. 12th house, we're kind of hidden. It's a good time to retreat. You see it, the 12th house dominant in with a lot of astrologers, as well as people who do a lot of meditation, yoga work, all things like that. So that's the 12th house. But on the shadow side for the 12th house, for Donald Trump this year, I believe this is the rising 12th house of, again, sorrow, self-undoing, and hidden enemies. Now, let's go back to our word compounding. What other themes, what's compounding this 12th house theme? Well, in a solar return, our sun is important. But what else have we got here? We've got a stellium of planets in the solar return 12th house. So not only do we have the 12th house rising from the natal, we have a stellium in the solar return 12th house. Again, reinforcing the themes of self-undoing, sorrow, hidden enemies. All these themes are coming up for him this year. And as I get into the charts, this is one of the reasons why I don't believe at all he'll be elected the next president of the United States. Okay, let's dive even further into this chart. So we know we've got 12th house rising. We've got the issues there. Excuse me. We've got all of the 12th house confinement as well. He was arrested. And let's now look at our Lord of the Year. So in this year, he's in a 7th house perfected year. So if you know your houses, one of the shadow sides of the 7th house is open enemies as opposed to hidden enemies, which is in the 12th. So not only are we in the time of open enemies, our Lord of the Year, because his natal 7th is here in the 8th, his natal 7th, our Lord of the Year ruling the 7th, his natal 7th is Saturn. Now, before we get more into Saturn, let's go back to the natal chart. What is the condition of Saturn in Donald Trump's natal chart? Well, it's in the 12th house, not in a great position. It's cadent, and it's also in detriment. If you follow traditional dignities and debilities, it's also in detriment. So not a great Lord of the Year, I believe, for Donald Trump. Okay, so we've got Lord of the Year. Natally, it's not in great shape. And here we're conjunct the solar return midheaven. Now, what's happened with Donald Trump this year? We've got Saturn, we've got authority, and we're in the 9th house of law. Well, he's now a convicted felon. Yes, he's still waiting to be, what would you call it? Sentenced?
Yeah.
Yeah, sentenced. Thank you. And to see what happens. But Lord of the Year, not great shape natally. And again, we're in the 9th house of law. So this is a theme. That's why the Lord of the Year is important, because we're bringing out the 9th house of law. What else is this Saturn doing? Well, it's also squaring off a lot of these 12th house planets. We've got Saturn at 19 degrees. We've got the Mercury at 21, the Sun at 22. Venus is a little bit further away. We're about 6 degrees separating. But we've got Saturn in a harsh connection with this 12th house energy in the area of confinement and sorrow. So thinking about all of the lawsuits, everything that's been happening. Now, forgive me, I go off on tangents. What I think might happen when he loses the election, he's still going to have all those court cases as we get into 2025. Because don't forget, the solar return for June 2024 goes into June of 2025. We're still going to have this theme of law, court cases, and especially if he doesn't win the presidency, all of these themes are going to be very, very heavy for this year. Okay, what else with this Saturn? Now, not everything is a negative for Donald Trump this year. Saturn conjunct the midheaven, for me, looking through thousands of charts, Saturn conjunct the midheaven can also mean authority or a sense of authority. And interestingly, Kamala Harris has natally Saturn conjunct the midheaven. Now, you think about all the glass ceilings she's broke, all the positions of authority she's had from, excuse me, attorney general, lawyer. What else has she been? Excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip.
Yeah, no, I mean, vice president. So.
Vice president.
And now the first, woman that actually might be positioned to win, and definitely the first woman of color that is like a serious contender.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's very, very much apparent, I think, when you look at Kamala's natal chart, and we'll get into that and have a look. But for Donald Trump in the solar return, this is just about the year or the year theme. So really, in a positive sense for Donald Trump, that sense of authority, well, he did knock everyone aside and become the head of the Republican ticket. So the way I'm viewing this Saturn conjunct the solar return midheaven is, yes, he's the leader. He's the authority of the Republican ticket. But again, on that flip side, it's also that element of law and fighting all of these court cases. So that's quite interesting with the Lord of the Year, Saturn. Now, what's another reason why this solar return is not as strong as 2016? What else have we got going on? Okay, we have Mars. Mars traditionally is not particularly happy in fixed Earth, in Taurus, is traditionally not in a great place. That Mars in detriment is ruling the 10th house of the solar return career. We've also got Chiron, so if you deal with the asteroids, that can give you a piece of information as well in the 10th house. Now, what's interesting, let's think about some of the decisions and some of the actions Donald Trump has taken this year. He's picked a very unpopular VP pick with J.D. Vance. Now, what happened at the, what do you call the place where they all come together? The convention? Republican convention?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The convention. I think at that point, he thought that Joe Biden would he would win against Joe Biden in a landslide. So I think that was part of his reasoning to double down on this MAGA-ness by picking J.D. Vance. So a lot of his decisions have been an issue for Donald Trump this year, and I think it's going to be a part of this self-undoing as we go deeper. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, forgive me, I go off on a lot of tangents. I do have a track record with these predictions, because back in July 2020, I looked at the charts and I said Joe Biden would become the next president of the United States. But I also said he would not run and seek re-election in 2024. And that video is out there. It's linked to the Kepler video. And that was 4 years ago. And I looked at the charts ahead and I thought, I don't think Joe Biden will be seeking re-election. And of course, that has come to pass. So just look back there that I do have a track record with this. So I'm hoping this is a continued 100% record. So going back to the weakness of this chart, we'll also see that a lot of these planets, if we go back to the solar return of 2016, we have a lot more angular planets, or we have planets in succedent houses. If we go back to our 2024 chart, a lot of it, we've got 7 out of the 10 planets in cadent houses. So our cadent houses are the 3rd house, the 6th, the 9th, and the 12th. Now, angular houses are always powerful. It's like 100% battery. When we get to a succedent house, it's more like a 50% battery. When we get to our cadent houses, we're not operating at full strength, particularly traditionally if we're looking at planetary strength and dignities. Now, we've got a whopping, as I've said, 7 planets in these cadent houses. So further weakening, for me, the strength of these planets for Donald Trump for 2024 in this solar return. Another thing I wanted to mention, what is the ruler of the solar return ascendant? Is this moon. We've got the moon in a cadent house, and it's also, the moon is a faster moving body. It's in an applying opposition to Saturn by about what, 5 degrees. So for me, I have this flavor of, if you want to bring some psychological element here, of moon opposite Saturn, an emotionally heavy and difficult year. Now, is that going to tie in with an emotionally difficult year because he loses the election? That is what I'm leaning towards. The reason why I say this as well, when I look back on my own solar returns, it was the year my grandmother passed away. I noticed what was coming up is I also had a moon tightly opposite Saturn. That can, not always, but it can often mean a heavy or an emotionally difficult year. And of course, when my grandmother passed away, it was for me an emotionally difficult year. But I think for Donald Trump, how this is going to manifest this year is when he loses the election for this one. Okay, so that is the difference between the strength of 2016 and the strength of and the weakness really of the solar return 2024. Now, Dabney, I said to you before the recording, I have exclusive information for your channel because I only found it out yesterday as I was going back through these charts just to prepare myself to talk about them again. So I was sitting there last night and I went back through my video and I thought to myself, what else did I miss here? And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even bring up the solar return chart for 2020 when Donald Trump lost the election. And I was like, how did I even miss that? So I pulled it up yesterday. And, you know, sometimes when you look at astrology and the hairs just stand up at the back of your neck and you're just like, this can't be, you can't be serious. So I had that feeling yesterday. So I pulled up the solar return chart for 2020. Now, you guys, you let me know what you see is the same as when he lost in 2020 and why I believe he'll lose in 2024 as well. So let's go to our solar return of 2020. Now, what are we noticing in the same year he lost the election? Of course, 2020 was his birthday in June, all the way into 2021. Of course, we have to encompass the riots of January 6th as well in there as well. Now, what is similar, which blew my mind yesterday, between the solar return of 2024 and now what I've just found out, the solar return of 2020, what theme or what house is rising again?
The 12th.
Exactly. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me, because we can go through our solar returns and we have another option of an 11 other signs that can be rising to the forefront. The ascendant, bringing up the themes of that house. Again, 2020, when I looked yesterday, we have, like we do now in 2024, the same rising in the solar return, and that falls in the natal 12th house, again, of sorrow, self-undoing, and hidden enemies. So often in astrology, and that's why I put this quote from Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And again, this just blew me away. And I think it just reinforces my, again, looking from my own biases and my own lens, that I do not believe Donald Trump will become the next president of the United States. We've got the same 12th house rising for the 2020 solar return where he lost the election. And as we go back, it's the same rising, which is really, really interesting. Now, of course, 2020 was different. We have other planets going on. For 2020, it was a third house perfected year, which makes Venus Lord of the Year. Now, look again, we've got Venus, an important planet for 2020, in the 12th house of the solar return. And this is why I always talk about look for repeating themes. People often panic when there's a particular transit that's coming their way or something happens. But for me, it's never just one planet that gives confirmation. You have to look through all of the charts, the transits, the progressions, the solar returns, look for themes that are coming around. And as we look for Donald Trump, we're bringing up this 12th. Again, we're bringing up the 12th house for the solar return, but we're also having the Lord of the Year in the 12th house of the solar return, as well as, again, as the sun. So again, it just blew my mind. We have Chiron closely conjunct the solar return midheaven. So we have some woundedness there. Do you enjoy Chiron? Do you practice with?
Oh yeah, Chiron's a big one that I look at for sure.
Absolutely. So it can be a place of, it's the wounded healer. It's the place where, there might be, and again, an element of sorrow. And for him, it was, public 10th house, career, the midheaven in here in whole sign is also here. Some issues. What else is going on with this? when I mentioned January 6th, actually, let's go before that. When he lost the election in 2020, let's take a look at this Mars, Neptune, and Moon in the ninth house. We're also bringing up the ninth house of law again. So what did Donald Trump and his team do after he lost the 2020 election? He filed 60 frivolous lawsuits in the courts in the ninth house of law. Now we've got Mars trying to take action, but we're tightly conjunct, partly conjunct Neptune. So the action he was trying to take place didn't work for Neptune. Neptune was like, no, it's can I swear on? I don't want to swear on this. This is all BS.
Yeah,
The
deception.
action,
Yeah, deception, illusion, deception.
exactly, that Neptune that you brought up before, as you were talking about that deception, illusion. So the lawsuits and the action him and his team were taking were all BS. They were nonsense, and of course the courts all threw that out. So that was interesting in this chart. But anyway, so when I pulled this up, I was like, wow. Not only did he lose in 2020, we've got the same rising sign, self-undoing, hidden enemies. And now this year, it's just compounding and reinforcing, the similar themes of losing in 2020. And I believe, again, losing this year in 2024. Okay, so those are our solar returns. Do you want me to take a quick look at some of the transits and progressions briefly? I don't know how much time you want me to waffle on.
Yeah, now what are you looking at Kamala's solar return, or if so?
Yes, we can. We can look at Kamala's as well. Yep. I won't.
You know what? Do
ramble
your
on.
thing, Caleb. Do your thing. Whatever you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I
No,
will say
whatever you got up, I love it. It's very interesting, and I love that you're a more traditional astrologer. So I think that's kind of not only for me to be exposed to some of the like Lord of the Year and some of these techniques that I don't traditionally practice. I think it's interesting to broaden the horizons, of a lot of the people watching too.
Absolutely wonderful. And I love evolutionary astrology and all these different branches because I learn all these different things. And what I call myself as well is more of a fusion astrologer. I'm not just traditional, solar returns. You can bring that in the mix, but we look at, chart patterns, all these different things in the classes we teach at Kepler. So at Kepler, we don't tell people what to think. We teach people how to critically think and then choose their path of which path they want to go down. So whether it's evolutionary astrology, more traditional, or if you want to fuse all of these techniques together, I just love fusing all of the techniques. And really, again, my track record, it works. For me, it works anyway. So that's a really good point.
No, I find traditional astrology much more predictive, than what I do. So, and I'm like the first to admit, like, I'm not a predictive astrologer. I'm much more of a, kind of psychological coach, empowering. What are you here to do in this lifetime? That's kind of the path that, when people come to get a reading from me, that's a lot of what, they might be stuck where they're looking for validation. But if they want like a straight up prediction, I think that looking to, people that do these sort of techniques and zodiacal releasing and things like that are really great techniques.
That's a really good point. And evolutionary astrology, particularly the evolutionary astrology working with the nodes, I think there's some beautiful work out there. Maurice Fernandez, I really enjoy his content that he does as well. So some really, really wonderful astrologers out there. And again, that's not to say traditional is the only way to predict. And of course, I consider astrology like a weather report. It's not, I'm not in that deterministic ancient mind view where these things will definitely happen. I'm not in that view. I see it more of a weather report. If the weatherman is saying there's a 90% chance of rain tomorrow, I'm probably going to want to bring an umbrella. Now, is that definitely going to happen? No, but I'm looking at chances and where the currents are taking us really with traditional astrology.
Right. And if you were to look at that 2024 chart for someone who's not running for president, someone that you have no biographical information on, you might say that this year is a year of expanding your spiritual awareness. And like you said, like taking sabbatical and, coming into contact with people that, can connect you with, something bigger than yourself, like your ancestry and, messages from beyond. And with that Neptune up on the midheaven, and this Lord of the Saturn in the ninth, kind of perfecting your beliefs and sort of being really disciplined about what you believe. So, it's kind of like we have this biographical information on this person. This person has shown that they are not really able to awaken spiritually. So, we're not, and we're not talking about, holding a Bible upside down. That's not what we're talking about when we say spiritual. We're talking about actual like connection to something bigger that has nothing to do with like the world stage. And so when you have these biographical pieces, you have to incorporate them when you're doing predictive astrology like this. And so that's where we talk about some of the bias coming in, is like we do look at this through our lens, which is like you can see that ninth house has to do with his court cases. But if this was a cold read on someone we've never met before, we're not going to assume that they have 93 felonies. Because that's not really what most people in this world. He's a very unusual figure. I think he was very fated to play a role in our lives, for better or worse, and he is a disruptor, right? And I would read that, Uranus in the 11th house, he's going to continue to disrupt things. Like, and there is kind of, but we also see, this is another thing, like I would never predict with Neptune on the midheaven that, someone's dementia is going to be, front and center, but we are watching the unfolding of, kind of his mind and his rambling and like him being confused and like
Dancing, swaying, doing little dances for 30 minutes.
Christy Noam. Oh my God, that was
She looks so
mind-blowing.
uncomfortable.
It was so mind-blowing. So anyway, I'll stop rambling, but I did want to kind of just sort of say that, like, that's where when we say that we look through our lens, we're looking at through the biographical, like what's available, right? Like this is all before us. It's not lies. This is good astrological interpretation. And don't think that like if you have Neptune on the midheaven, you're going to get dementia. But if we see it with this person, we might call it out. Okay, I'm sorry, go back to your thing.
No, actually, Dabney, you bring up some really brilliant points and beautiful delineation, because as you're saying, we're looking at the context of either the client or the person that's coming to us. Now, if this was somebody else, and the things I'm saying today obviously pertain to Donald Trump in the life he's been leading, in some ways in a destructive way. Now, if someone came with this solar return, as you're saying, Dabney, I might be like, oh, this is a good time. We're in the 12th house, a good time, like Oprah, go on an Oprah retreat, go and take some time to relax. We still have this Mercury, which is powerful. It's in its own rulership. Maybe a good time. If this was somebody who was given a presentation at a retreat, we've got a Saturn, a sense of authority. We've got that, as you mentioned, that wonderful Neptune on the positive side, the spirituality. And with all this 12th house, this could be teaching in a retreat. If someone came to me with a chart like that, with that context, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, this is a wonderful time to go and give your spiritual teachings and do all those kind of things. But as you're saying, Dabney,
that's a big thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually, you did point something out, which I did forget to mention, is that for this year, we do have the Uranus, which is tightly conjunct his natal midheaven. Now, if we go back to the attempted assassination, it was quite interesting, not to go too deep into it, but it's quite interesting. We had the Uranus and Mars square his natal ascendant around that time. So unexpected events around his health, his body, his ascendant, the attempted assassination. But I also hear wonderful astrologers who I highly respect, even talking about Donald Trump not even making it to the election, which I find really interesting. Now, with Uranus, no astrologer can predict what will happen with Uranus. It's unpredictable. So all I'm saying in these charts today is, all my statement is that he won't become the next president of the United States. I don't know if that's because he won't make it to the election. That's what some astrologers are saying. I just, in my mind and all through these charts, I'm like, he's just not become, in my mind, not going to be the next president of the United States. I think on balance, I'm not sure about him not making it to the election. Personally, if I look at all these charts, I think he will. But really, as I've said before, you can't predict Uranus. So if that happens, then, happy days. As well. Yeah, I'm not going to lose. I'm not. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to lose any sleep with that. So you let me know. I won't go on at length about some of these combined charts here. Now, don't worry if you're looking at this chart, all of these charts, and it's a bit of a mess. This is what we do when we start combining all of the charts. So let me just break this down. So in the very inner wheel, and it's quite hard to see, and I will explain this. In the very inner wheel, we have Donald Trump's natal chart. In the second wheel out, we have secondary progressions. In the third wheel out, we have what's called directions, primary directions. In the very outer wheel, we have the transits. Now, of course, I'm sorry to squeeze all of these in together. I just wanted to mush the information together and point a few things out, and I'll do that fairly quickly. Okay, so a lot of things I've been hearing online and a lot of the arguments that people are making saying Donald Trump, will win in a landslide, which, I mean, he wouldn't do anyway. But they're all talking. I'm like, okay, whatever you want to say. And some of the astrology they're going through is a little bit questionable anyway. Anyway, I'm going off on tangents. The argument, and which obviously is a positive for Donald Trump, is we have transiting Jupiter going through the 11th house whole sign. If you use a quadrant house system, say Placidus, that Jupiter is going to be transiting through the 10th. So you can bring it 10th house themes or 11th house themes, however you do your astrology, that works as well. So yes, a Jupiter trine going back and forth, trining his natal Jupiter, yes, that can be fortunate. You think about things he's getting away with right now. Jupiter, yes, we can put Saturn in the 9th with law, but traditionally we can have Jupiter associated with law as well, and certainly in certain texts. But really, if we're talking about luck and fortune, he's getting away with stuff. He's getting away with lot that any normal citizen would be behind bars right now, waiting for sentences. So I think that's playing out. Also, Jupiter through the 11th or the 10th, if you view it that way, he's still very popular. Jupiter is expansive. We're in the 11th house of supporters, community. He's still going out and doing his speeches, and he's still really, really popular with a segment of the population and his supporters. So that's Jupiter there. Trining his natal Jupiter, absolutely. I think that's where we're starting to see it, and that's going to be doing that for a while. So yes, that's important. But like I said before, I think it's important that people don't focus on one particular transit. Say you've got a Pluto transit and you think, oh my days, I'm doomed because it's about to square my sun or my moon. Yes, certain things might happen, or a transit might come along and you think, oh, nothing happened. I think that's the importance of astrology, where you have to look at all these various techniques and start to find patterns and not just to focus on one thing. At Kepler, we always talk about the rule of three. If you get three confirmations of that something may or may not happen, that's more weighted in terms of prediction, that you need more than one. So Jupiter, yes, we're having a happy dance through the 11th, popular with the supporters, an element of luck and getting away with things, but that's not enough for me to indicate he's going to be the next president of the United States. Okay, what else is going on? And what I find is very, very striking as we go through this past decade. Now, I won't, it probably takes too long to explain about directions and primary directions, but when we look to the third wheel here, we have all of his directed planets that all go at the same rate through somebody's life. Now, to cut a long story short, we can see from the end of 2012 just how dignified and powerful a lot of these directed planets are for Donald Trump. This is right now in 2024, but we still had Mercury domicile. Mercury is very happy in Virgo. If you have any Virgo friends with the Mercury there, quite happy that Mercury. We have a Saturn that's been exalted for a long time. We have Venus. Venus is very, very happy in Libra. Venus is domicile there, very, very strong. Mars, for a time, as we've mentioned before, is at home in Scorpio, very, very happy in Scorpio. But now, and this is still the case for 2024, by the way, it's still a lot of dignified planets. But this is where, for me, Donald Trump, this is where it changes and where his luck, for me, starts to run out. Let's take a look at this directed Jupiter. So Jupiter spends about 30 years directed in a sign. Now, I've said before, for a very long time, apart from the last 2 years, Jupiter has been going through Sagittarius. Now, Jupiter is at home in Sagittarius and mutable fire, very, very dignified for the past 30 years. So yes, he's had issues with bankruptcies if you go further back, but in general, he's got away with things. That Jupiter, as we've said, natally is very strong for him. Now, you might ask the question, what has changed now for Donald Trump in 2024? Well, in 2022, this directed Jupiter went into Capricorn. Now, traditionally, Jupiter is in its fall in Capricorn. Now, for me, this is a Jupiter falling from grace. And I believe now Donald Trump's luck has started and finally started to run out. That Jupiter that was so strong for so long, you know, still in 2016, very, very fortunate. Now for the last 2 years, now Donald, your luck is starting to run out. What else is compounding this fall from grace for me? Well, if we go to our secondary progressions, we have secondary progressed moon for the past, at this stage, around election day, for the past 9 months. The moon in Scorpio is traditionally not very happy. Moon in Scorpio is in its fall. So you combine this with an element of falling from grace, with an emotionally difficult time where he's quite reactive. It's a Mars rule sign. He can be angry at this time. And if we go back to that solar return, when we had the ruler of the solar return opposite the Saturn, and when I said it might be an emotionally difficult year, again, when I'm talking about looking for confirmations, we had that moon opposite Saturn, emotionally difficult year, along with the moon that's gone into its fall. Another confirmation with Jupiter falling from grace, and his luck is starting to run out. So again, when I bring all of these techniques together, it's just the charts are singing to me and saying, and I might have to have another profession if I get this wrong. But I can't see any other way that he becomes the president of the United States. I am just not seeing it at all.
Callum, if you get this wrong, if we all get this wrong, we may all need another profession, because I don't know how popular astrologers are going to be with the Christian nationalists.
You know what? That's a really great point. We're going to be like we're going to be lawless, and we're going to be outlawed. We're not going to be able to practice.
My channel honestly, may have to come down altogether. I may have to, move to Portugal. We'll see.
I said to a friend of mine actually, and they were like, "Well, what? Because I'm pretty confident in my track record. People who are skeptical of astrology might say, oh, in 2020 it was a 50-50. But I did say 4 years ago that Joe Biden would win the election. He wouldn't seek re-election in 2024, looking at the astrology. So that's more difficult to predict. And I believe Kamala Harris will win this year. But a friend of mine said today, what are you going to do? And I thought about it, and I'm like, yes, it can be a hit to your reputation and things like that. But really, I'm an Aquarian. My ego is not complete. Well, we can have arrogant Aquarians. I'm not saying that. But I'm like, that's going to be the least of my concern. A Donald Trump victory, me being wrong about this, is going to be the very, very least of my concerns. And as you've just said, it's not going to be a top of the list. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, the reason why I did put caveats on the side here is that we know in the United States that there's been issues with Supreme Court of the United States intervention. I hope that's not a caveat in this election. I hope it's comfortable enough where Kamala, we don't have to get to that stage. And we also have to watch out for state legislators buggering about in the background and trying to fix things. So, even though I'm saying Donald Trump, I don't think will become the next president of the United States, I think my only caveat is any, I won't swear on this channel, any fudgery behind the scenes by, by the state legislators or the Supreme Court is something we've got to watch out for. And I might do a video on that in terms of looking at those charts. Okay, Dabney, do we have quick time to look at Kamala's? I know I've rambled on and on, so I do apologize for that.
No, yeah, let's do Kamala quickly. Just because I'm at Open, I've got a class, and you have to go vote. But I think that
is true. That is true.
We would not be doing a service if we didn't at least kind of punch through what's going on for her.
Absolutely. So I'll be very, very brief. How much time do you have, by the way? And I'll just quickly...
You know what? Do your thing, Callum. Don't worry.
Okay. I'll be as quick as possible. Just to compound the what we've been talking about with Donald Trump, I don't think he'll be the next president of the United States. I just wanted to look at Kamala's chart and her solar return. Now, this is a current, because what date are we on now? So we're not quite at 2 days away for her solar return. So let's forget about the current solar return, because as we're now going into Kamala's solar return for 2024, right before the election. So very briefly, what's going on with Kamala? Now, I pulled up this chart, and I'm going to contradict myself here because I talked about looking for confirmations and more than 3. But when I pulled up this chart, again, the solar return in the inner wheel, natal chart in the outer wheel, I was like, wow, Pluto, natal Pluto right on the solar return midheaven. And I was like, public position of power. Now, of course, she already has a public position of power. She's the vice president. But why is this coming back around again? Not only do we have Pluto on the solar return midheaven, we have the Venus and the Uranus. Now, for me, this is a shake-up of, okay, we're going here from vice president to the president of the United States, just reinforcing that I believe that months ago, when she just jumped into the race, that she would beat Donald Trump and become the next president of the United States. Okay, so that's it. Another thing quickly to add is that she's in a first house perfected year. So this is very much indicative of coming out. It's a 12-year cycle, first house perfected year, coming out into your personality and bold and upfront. If anyone is interested, I'm not an expert in this. If anyone interested in Chinese astrology with the elements and the zodiac and the animal signs, we find Donald Trump is in a dog year and a Chinese year, which is the opposition to the dragon year. And who's a dragon? Both Kamala and Tim Walz. So that's just giving me more information about how powerful their ticket is. And so, yeah, that was pretty much it. It was this Pluto on the solar return midheaven. What else did I talk about? We've got a beautiful Venus conjunct the solar return ascendant. So this positivity, this joy, being out there, being bold. And yeah, so briefly, her solar return is just screaming to me that she will, if she ran against Donald Trump, which I thought came up months ago, that she would beat him. And very, very quickly, I'll take about 30 seconds to mention this. This is the natal chart, Kamala's natal chart. We talked about the natal authority that she has, Saturn conjunct the midheaven. We have secondary progressions, directions, and transits. Now, let's look at this Saturn. Secondary progressed Saturn, I never usually mention because it moves so slowly. Well, secondary progressed Saturn has moved into a 10th house in 2020 when she became vice president in the 10th house of career, again, authority. And we have transiting Saturn at this time around election day through the 10th house. 3 confirmations of authority, authority, authority. And for me, why I think she'll become the next president of the United States. There's more to say about all of these charts, but I'll leave it here because I know you are busy. But in conclusion, if I just can't believe, I just don't think there's any way that with all of these combination charts with Donald Trump and Kamala, that he will, for me, will definitely not become the next president of the United States unless there's some Supreme Court intervention or state legislatory fudgery. And Kamala's charts are looking very, very strong as well. And that's my conclusion. So I'll stop the screen share.
No, I love it. That's so much great information for everybody. I think it gives us all some hope that I think as much as Donald Trump has been a fated person in our lives, I believe Kamala Harris is as well. And that is something, we can kind of look at, we've just had this full moon that was conjunct her full moon, right? Like that had echoes of the, it was kind of in some ways like kind of wrapping up the eclipse season, which also, there's just been a lot of things that would indicate that, things fell in her direction, much the way they fell in his direction. And I think she's got a tough fight. I think she's out there fighting it. And so we do have to vote. We can't just assume the astrology is going to take care of everything.
Absolutely. Bums off seats, get out to the polls, make your voices heard. I did say months ago, it felt like a very Venusian year where women, all women, whether it's women of color, going to come out in full force. We're already seeing that through the disparity of the ballots. Then there's a 10-point gap between those voting. And very quickly, I forgot to mention, when I said it was important for Donald Trump in 2016, he had that Jupiter return. Kamala Harris, not only does she have that full moon energy in her natal chart, and you've mentioned the moon in there as well, she has just gone past a few months ago her Jupiter return. So look at that synchronicity of his Jupiter return. He became the next president of the United States. Kamala Harris only recently has just been through her Jupiter return. Now, the more you look at these charts, I'm just more than convinced. Again, am I so blinded by my own biases and through my own lens? I hope not. I think I've been objective enough. And I can't wait to go and vote today.
That's it. Like, I know that I was terrified in 2016. I thought, at the very last minute after the Access Hollywood tape came out, I thought we were okay because I was sort of under an old paradigm of how things work. But I also think it's interesting to watch Kamala going on all of these male-dominated channels and kind of going into the lion's den, going to Fox News, going on Howard Stern. I think she's going on Joe Rogan. She's reaching out to spaces that have typically not been, super kind to Democratic women. And so, there's another sort of like, she's doing things differently, and that's, I think, encouraging. So I'm grateful for your analysis. I think it's really interesting. I think everyone else who's watching this channel is going to be grateful as well. So please do visit Kepler College, check out their YouTube channel. Callum interviews amazing people. And as always, there is a reason and a season for it all. The universe is conspiring to help us, even when it doesn't feel like it. We just have to realize these are all unfoldings that are bringing us into the future. And there's just something bigger going on. So get out and vote, be a part of the solution. And Callum, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for the invite. And of course, I do Let's Talk Astrology episodes. And Dabney, I'd love to have you on our show as well.
I'd love to do it. Okay, take care of everyone. Bye.
Thank you. And I really enjoy Oprah. I'm so jealous.
Oh man, I wish you were here. All right, take care. Bye.